I'm in Joshua chapter 11. That's going to mess us all up. Joshua chapter 10, starting in verse 1. Now it came to pass, when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all the men thereof were mighty. Wherefore Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent unto Hoham, king of Hebron, and unto Piram, king of Jarmuth, and unto Japhai, king of Lachish, and unto Deber, king of Eglon, saying, Come up unto me, and help me, that we may smite Gibeon, for it hath made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, gathered themselves together and went up, they and all their hosts, and encamped before Gibeon, and made war against him. The men of Gibeon sent unto Joshua the camp to Gilgal, saying, Slack not thy hand from thy servants, come up to us quickly, and save us, and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains are gathered together against us. So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said unto Joshua, Fear them not, for I have delivered them into thine hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee. Joshua therefore came unto them suddenly, and went up from Gilgal all night. The Lord discomfited them before Israel, and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them along the way that goeth up to Beth-horon, and smote them at Azekah and unto Makkedah. And it came to pass, as they fled from before Israel, and were in the going down to Beth-horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died, and they were they were more which died with hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. Then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said, In the sight of Israel, sun, stand still upon Gibeon, and thou, moon, in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hastened not to go down about a whole day. And there was no day like that before it or after it. No kidding. The sun standing still. There was no day like it before or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. Let's go ahead and pray. Lord, I want to thank you for the time we can take in your house and in your word this evening. Lord, I do pray that you will. I pray that you will use me tonight, Lord. As I said at the start, I know that my voice is failing me a little bit tonight, Lord. I pray that you'll help that not to get in the way of what you have for us this evening. I pray that you'll just work through me tonight, Lord. I pray in your name. Amen. You can go ahead and be seated. This last little bit, personally, and I actually with the teens, I've done a few different of our in Sunday school of our messages out there, out of kind of this time in the life of the children of Israel. God worked in some miraculous ways, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. This what I'm saying right now is not in my notes. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But God worked in some miraculous ways, and it really is quite a thought. Their parents, 40 years before the children of Israel entered the Promised Land, came to the edge of the Promised Land, went in, sent the spies in, and determined that the giants are too big, the walls are too tall, the enemy is too strong, we can't do this. And because they didn't have faith in what God was going to do for them, an entire generation missed out on what God had for them. They never got to see the promise of God. They never got to see the blessing of God because they did not trust God enough to take care of the obstacles in their path. So that has now happened, and we get to the book of Joshua, and they are presented with exactly the same choice that their parents had faced 40 years previously. You're here at the edge of the promised land. Will you go in? And this morning, I actually, speaking to the teens, pointed out the fact that would be an awfully challenging thing. You have to think they have spent 40 years wandering the desert, hearing from their parents how big those giants are. You know how stories grow. I mean, you saw a giant and come back and the spies say, they were 9 foot tall. By 40 years of wandering in the desert, those giants are 30 feet tall. They're growing with every year because you're giving, these stories. You have to think this generation is coming to the promised land. It's going to be an intimidating thing that I'm going to go in and face the land that my dad was too scared to face. I'm going to go fight those giants that my parents said were too big. That's where they're at here. But because, and I'm going to get ahead of myself, so when we backtrack in a moment, just stick with me. But because they decided that we're going to trust our God, they got to see God work in some mighty ways that their parents missed out on. Because they simply decided, we're going to follow God. So some background on Joshua chapter 10 here of what's happening kind of to start this message. They've come into the promised land at this point. They've taken Jericho. They had their stumble at Ai, and then they have now taken Ai. The Gibeonites at this point, just before Joshua chapter 10, the Gibeonites have come and made a treaty with Joshua. They've seen what Joshua and the children of Israel are doing. They've seen the way that their God is working. So the Gibeonites decided, hey, we're going to trick them into thinking we're from a faraway country, and we're going to, make this treaty with them so they won't come and destroy us as well. One of the fears that the Gibeonites would have had in coming to Joshua and the children of Israel, they had previously, and this is, I understand we're still kind of on some background here, the Gibeonites had previously been invited, if you will, to join all the other kings of the land that we just read about in the start of Joshua chapter 10. They would have been one of those enemies attacking the children of Israel. They turned down, instead of siding with the Amorites and with the enemies of Israel, they decided they're going to join the children of Israel. They saw, hey, there's a difference here. There's something different. They might not have understood what it was about the children of Israel that were different, but they saw there was something. So they decided, okay, well, instead of joining the 5 other kingdoms that are going to all come together to face the children of Israel, we're going to join them. Not surprisingly, that upset the other kings. When you choose to, not only am I going to not join your attack, but I'm instead going to go join your enemy, that's going to upset some people. You think about it, you see that in every large war. People or nations are often forced to take a side, to choose between one group or the other. And when you choose, the side that you choose against is always going to be upsetting you. I think of the Civil War, some of the extremely difficult choices that had to be made. There are countless accounts in the Civil War when you had family members who were divided between sides. Pastor joked about the Orozcos and, her being, and one Brother Orozco, in all fairness, he was torn in himself. He had a Mariners shirt on and a Dodgers hat on, so he was torn in himself. But mention, that their house being divided. Can you imagine the Civil War? It was common that a house was divided between the North and the South. That maybe 2 brothers and one would choose to fight for the North and one choosing to fight for the South. Again, there are a lot of accounts of that happening. I'm telling you, that happens. Things like that go on. I'm confident that there were people who got upset about that. Mad that you would choose to join with the enemy rather than join with us. But very often that's part of of war. The sides have to be chosen, and it always causes one side to feel slighted. That's what's happening here. The Gibeonites have decided, well, they didn't want to join the armies of the land to try to fight against Israel, which is a little interesting because the passage, we just read it. It tells us that they had a strong army of their own. So if anyone would have felt strong enough to fight against Israel, it would have been these guys. Where we just read in Joshua chapter 10, it talks about their army and the strength of their army. They would have been the ones that, the other armies all wanted them to be a part of it because they're the big, strong guys who are going to, be able to really help you in this thing. But they recognized that alone they couldn't stand against this army, and more importantly, they recognized they couldn't stand against the God of Israel. They even recognized that joined together with the others of the land, this was a fight that they could not win. So you have the whole trickery thing that they pulled. We're going to walk to the Israelite camp and we're going to pretend that we are from a long, long way away. We're going to put on our old clothes and our old shoes and carry old moldy food so that we can act like we've been, on this long journey to come and make a treaty with you. And that way, they won't kill us. Again, justifiably upset everyone else. They rejected us. They joined our enemies. What's worse, they know your plan. So the decision from all the kings of the land, again, we just read this, is that before we attack Israel, we attack the Gibeonites. Which puts the Gibeonites in a tough place. Can you imagine every other nation teamed up against you? It's what they're looking at. Every king, every city, every army that you've ever joined forces with in the past are marching straight at you right now. I mean, this is going to be a scary and an intimidating thing. I don't care how big or strong your city is, or how tall your walls are, how strong your army is. When every army unites against you, it doesn't look good for you. On top of the fact, this is the first test to see what Israel's actually going to do. You made this league together, but it has not yet been proven. This is a pretty big first way to prove it. I mean, Israel has been tricked. By this point, Israel knows. Joshua understands that they've been tricked. Joshua could just decide, hey, this is our chance to get rid of the Gibeonites. God said that we can't kill them because we made a league with them, but they tricked us, and we don't think that's right. We were taken advantage of, so we can't kill them. But we don't have to be in a hurry to come rescue them either, do we? We can just let someone else take care of them for us. I can see as they send those messengers off to get Joshua that they, might be saying a little prayer that, they actually come back with Joshua and his army. And that they get back in time. Verse 6 that we read, chapter 10, verse 6, the men of Gibeon sent unto Joshua to the camp of Gilgal, saying, slack not thy hand from thy servant. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains are gathered together against us. You can almost hear, if I had a better voice right now, I was trying to give inflection and it just wasn't happening. You can almost hear the panic in their voice as they send those messengers, though. Don't slack your hand. Please come quickly because we're going to die. Joshua was true to their word. They had made an alliance with them. They had agreed to protect them. And that's exactly what they were going to do. But before they go, Joshua seeks God. Now, I have heard it said that he did it hoping that God would allow them not to go. There were times that God did that they would go to God and God would want to attack this city and God would say no. I heard preachers who have said, well, Joshua sought God here in hopes that God would say, no, this is how I'll deliver you from the promise. I read one this week that suggested this was Joshua trying to stall, thinking, maybe God would take a while to answer him so that by the time they got there, it'd be too late. I don't believe that's it at all. I think Joshua learned from his recent mistakes. I mentioned Ai. 2 times now, Joshua has made a hasty decision when they went to attack Ai and when they made this league with the Gibeonites. 2 times now, Joshua has made a hasty decision without seeking God, and 2 times now, it's come back to hurt him and the nation. I believe that this is as simple as Joshua has learned a lesson. Hey, we need to seek God before moving, because even when something seems like it's an obvious, yes, this is what I should do, both times he's moved without God has come back to bite him. Whether it seems like an obvious choice or not, seek God. Whether it seems like there's no time to wait, seek God. But what God says in response to Joshua in the next few verses is where we're going to put our focus tonight. Let's read verse 7 and 8 together again. It says, "So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said unto Joshua, Fear them not, for I have delivered them into thy hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee." Here it is. Go, and don't be afraid, because I will defeat them. I mean, this is going to be a scary thing. They're running into this thing. They're about to attack an army that has 5 nations combined army. I don't know the numbers. God doesn't give us that, but I have to assume an army that is this many combined has to be larger than what the children of Israel are in their army right now. He tells Joshua, don't be afraid, because I'll deliver you. I'm going to win this fight for you. And God fights and wins for them in a miraculous way. It's really, it can be described as nothing else. This battle is going to seem like an impossible battle, that we are going to run and we're going to try and save the Gibeonites, us against 5 different kingdoms. It's going to seem like an impossible battle. But God fights for them and wins in a miraculous way. So 4 ways out of this passage that I want us to look at that it shows us that God fought for them. The first is, the passage shows us God discomforted them. Okay, at verse 10, the Lord discomforted them before Israel, and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them along the way that goeth up to Beth-horon, and smote them to Azekah unto Makkedah. Before the battle even had begun, God had already started. I mean, think about it. But before the battle had even begun, God had already started. The first sword hasn't been drawn yet, the first spear thrown or arrow released or whatever, and God's already working. God's already in this, mentally preparing Joshua's army for victory. I already said it multiple times. This is going to be a scary thing. The idea that you're facing an army that's bigger than you are, and they are upset that you're there. You are in their land. The children of Israel are the ones, they're in someone else's land at this point. God's promised it to them, but they still have to win the land. You have to think, you're going into this thinking, even if we win, we're going to get hurt. I mean, even if we win this war, this battle, we're going to get hurt. They talk about, casualties of war. Just because you're the victor doesn't mean that you didn't lose men. Doesn't mean that you didn't get hurt. You won, but people got hurt along the way. Now, I did not confirm these numbers. So if they're wrong, don't blame me. I did not confirm these numbers. But here's what I read this week. World War I, Allied armies won, but had more casualties. Allied nations lost, according to this article I read, Allied nations lost 5.7 million soldiers, 3.67 million civilians. According to that total, 9.37 Allied died. Central Powers, 4.02 million soldiers died, 5.2 million civilians, for a total of 9.2. Now again, I know those numbers are fairly close, 9.37 to 9.2, but more Allied, at least according to that, and again, I don't know that the numbers are accurate. However, I did look at multiple different sources that confirmed that there were more killed and injured on the Allied side than Central Powers. So think about this. They won. But a whole lot of people died to win. So I can see the children of Israel. They're running down to this fight knowing we may win, but there's going to be losses. I mean, we may win this thing, but men are going to be killed. We may win this thing, but there's going to be men hurt. But before they even began fighting, God had prepared them, telling them not to fear, because they didn't have to fight alone. Again, we see this over and over, how many times God talks about that I'm going to fight for you. At this point, they've already seen the example of God fighting for them. They've already seen what God did in Jericho when they took Jericho. They know what he can do. They know that he's capable of winning for them in a way that requires nothing from them. Not only did he prepare them for victory, he mentally prepared their enemy for defeat. The word discomforted, it has a couple of meanings to it. One is to embarrass or make uncomfortable. These other nations for quite some time now have known that Joshua and the children of Israel were coming. At this point, they've seen what Israel has done to Jericho and Ai. They rehearsed it at the start of this chapter. They know what they have done. They know what they are there to do. The fact that they are trying to get all these armies together, all these kingdoms that normally would be bickering and fighting amongst themselves, the fact that they are trying to get all of their armies together to fight and attack before being attacked shows they're mentally scared. It shows that they already know, hey, I'm concerned about being defeated when it comes time for my city. And the reality is, your brain is a powerful thing. I mean, once your brain has accepted defeat, it's extremely hard to overcome that. I was talking to someone about that recently, and it was he directed me to was a research thing that he had looked up online. So he sent this link over to me. He brought up a competition weightlifter, and his name is skipping my mind right now, but he brought up this competition weightlifter who he listens to. And here was this guy's, he has won in the past tons of different weightlifting competitions, and he never knows how much weight he lifts. He won't let them tell him. He doesn't want to look. He doesn't want to know. And here's his reason. Because if he knows, he'll get a mental block at what he thinks his max is. If I know how much I'm lifting, then I'm going to think, oh, well, that's the most I can do. And his mentality is, if I don't know, I don't have to battle my brain. Because your brain is powerful. You walk into battle with the predetermined idea that I cannot win this, you won't win. Well, that's why I always, try to encourage people to go into things with the attitude thinking I can rather than I can't, because I can't means you won't. Before the battle has even begun, God is mentally preparing Joshua's army for victory and the enemy for defeat. He also physically impeded the enemy. I told you there's multiple definitions of that word discomfited. The other definition can be to physically hinder. I almost coughed right onto the microphone. That wasn't fun. I'm not going to have to go through the passages right now, but most of the reference in the Bible to this word discomfited refers to an enemy being discomfited with the edge of the sword, wounded. So now, not only are they fighting a mental game, going into battle expecting a loss, but now they are physically hampered by God. I mean, that's the first part of this miraculous fighting that God is, before the battle even starts, God is preparing both sides. Second part, number 2, it tells us that God chased him. That sip right there is going to get us slightly further in this message. It tells us God chased him. It was normal to defeat an enemy and the army than chase them. You look biblically and you see that example often. David defeats Goliath. Immediately what happens? The Philistine army runs, and you don't see the armies of Israel just standing on the hillside cheering and watching them run. Now you read of them chasing them down and killing them as far as they ran. It's sort of the mentality of finishing what you started. You see that historically. Battles that were not just fought until one side or the other quit. They didn't just end and go home, but they often ended when there was no one left to fight. So losing a battle and being chased by their army was normal. But notice this, verse 10, the Lord discomfited them before Israel and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon and chased them along the way that goeth, and it goes on where he's chasing them. This is talking about the army of Joshua and the Lord. So it's not just Joshua and his army chasing them, but God is chasing them. Here's the problem with being chased by the Lord. You might outrun an army. It's possible that some of this army is fast runners and that they can, on foot outrun Joshua and his army. We were joking yesterday. You knew this was coming. I saw the smirk on his face. It's not in my notes. It just popped into my head as we're saying this, and he knew exactly what it was. We were talking yesterday, and he was joking around about something, and he goes, "As long as I have my legs, I can outrun most things. It's going to be fine." And Zach goes, "Oh, so I just need to take your legs out first." That's a perfect solution to it. No, it's possible that you might outrun an army. It's possible that someone's a fast runner and can just outrun Joshua's army. And, if I can only get back to the safe city, if I can just outrun them until I get back inside your walls, then maybe you can survive this. But you can't outrun God. It's already where you're going. You might out-hide an army. This is, after all, their homeland. They would know the terrain better. They would know where areas to escape where they may be. And it might be that if you're only talking about another army, that you could find a place to hide from them. I mean, that's what the kings try to do. That when they see that the battle isn't going well and isn't going how they anticipated, they take off and run. And they find a cave and thought, we can hide out in here. And they won't know that we're here, and we can hide until they leave. That might work against just another army, but you can't hide from God. It's kind of hard to find a cave that the Creator doesn't know about. That's a problem. You might be able to regroup and fight against just another army. It may be that you can run back to your stronghold and you can bunker yourself in there and regroup your army and strengthen your lines and your defense and put up a fight again, but you can't do that to God. God fought them miraculously. He discomforted them. He chased them. Number 3, the Bible tells us that God attacked them from above. Look at verse 11 through 13. When it came to pass, they fled from before Israel and were in the going down to Beth-horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azadek, and they died. They were more which died with hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. And Joshua spake to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said, in the sight of Israel, sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hastened not to go down about a whole day. He attacks in ways that are not your normal battle scenes. God's always used some abnormal ways to win battles. Ways that by human definition don't make sense. Examples like I mentioned David earlier, a little shepherd boy taking on a giant, not with a sword or a spear, with a rock and a stick. It doesn't make sense. Not even to God's people did that make sense. Remember, the king tried to outfit David with his sword and armor. Even though it was too big for him, he tried to outfit because it didn't even make sense to God's people that David could go out there and take on this giant alone with a sling. But God often uses abnormal ways. Examples like armies taking on their enemy, using only pitchers and lamps. Things like Jericho defeated by walking around the city and yelling. That's abnormal. I assure you that didn't make sense to Joshua. That did not make sense to his soldiers. It didn't make sense to the men of Jericho. But God fights in some abnormal ways. God's used some odd ways at other times. But this, what we see here in Joshua chapter 10, is different even for God. Tells us first that he fought with how's it worded in verse 11. The Lord cast down great stones from heaven. Starts off calling them stones, which my brain I picture like a large rock, and later in the verse calls them hailstones. Either way you want to view this, God defeats this army, hailstones. God defeats this army by throwing hailstones from the sky at him. And the verse tells us that more died from the hailstones than died by the sword. More enemies killed by hailstones falling from the sky than by Joshua's army, which is impressive enough. But I want to point something out. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who thinks this way. If Joshua's army is in there fighting, killing them, some of them with the sword, right? At the same time that these hailstones are falling. There's two armies in this battle. The Bible doesn't tell us that any of Joshua's men died from the hailstones. So picture this with me. Two armies fighting. I mean, come on, battle there, you're face to face with them. Two armies fighting in a valley. A storm rolls up so that hailstones are falling so big that they are killing people, falling from the sky. But they're only hitting the bad guys. I mean, I'm not trying to make light of what God did here, but you've heard of, laser-guided missiles. I mean, these are God-guided hailstones. This is something, this is not normal, right? This is abnormal that you're going to have two armies in this middle of a valley fighting, but the hailstones are only killing one side. So it's either God-guided hailstones or it's God and the angels up there, throwing each one personally with incredible accuracy. I'm not trying to make light of this, but it's only killing one of the two armies. That's something that only God can do. Amen. I can picture Joshua as they fight and he sees, the storm rolling in. I can picture as it's rolling in, Joshua thinking, well, I don't know what God is going to do exactly, but this is about to get good. He's already seen God work in some miraculous ways in a few other battles. This is about to get good. God's attacking from above. And by the way, since the battle is going so well, let's just stop the sun in its tracks. Let's just stop the sun. God tells the sun and the moon, hold on a minute, boys, I'm not done yet. It's a little hard to throw these hailstones and hit people with accuracy if it's dark outside, so we'll just hold up for a minute. Can you imagine the miraculous ways that God is fighting here? They are discomforted mentally and physically, defeated before the battle even begins. They are chased by God with no way to escape. And then not only do they then have to battle Joshua and his army on the ground with them, but they're fighting with heavenly forces coming down from above them. Which really all works out to the last point that I want us to see tonight in this miraculous fighting in what was an impossible battle, and it is this: for the Lord fought for them. So that in verse 14, there was no day like that before it or after it, and the Lord hearkened unto the voice of that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of the man, for the Lord fought for Israel. All phases of this battle. God gave the permission. God gave the battle plan. God prepared the enemy. God fought from above. Every phase of this battle was God. And more than just, if you look hard enough, you might be able to see God in it. All phases of this battle were undeniably God. When the sun stands still so that you can finish whooping up on the army, there's no denying that was God. And I love the verse, there was no day like this before or after. When hailstones big enough to kill men fall from the sky but only hit the opposing army, so that more men die from hailstones than by your sword, that is undeniably God. The Lord fought for them in all phases of this battle was God. The victory was of God. So that had been the case throughout their time, throughout going through this, and not just the time in the nation while they were in the promised land. God was fighting for them in Egypt. God was fighting for them to get them out of Egypt. God was fighting for them in the desert. He's fighting throughout this time for them. Once again, this is undeniably God getting the victory. So what's the point of this? What's the lesson that we can learn from Joshua chapter 10? And I believe it's this: to man's eyes, this battle would have appeared impossible. I've tried to use that word specifically throughout the message. In man's eyes, this battle would have appeared impossible. You are outnumbered, you are outmanned, you are more than likely outtrained and outarmed. They know the terrain better, they know the countryside better. I mean, in man's eyes, this looks like an impossible battle. And yet they win. Not because of themselves, but because of their God. Often in life, we face the impossible battles. Those things that we look at and we see no way of victory. That we look at and from our eyes and our point of view, we see no possible way that we can overcome. And yet victory can still be achieved. Not in your strength. Not in yourself. Not in your ability. But in your God. 2 Corinthians 10 verse 4 says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds." The impossible battles, the things that we say, boy, there's just no way I can overcome that, is possible when it's God fighting for you. I mentioned this at the beginning of the message. The generation before these people chose not to go in the promised land because the giants were too big, the walls were too tall, the armies were too strong. This generation follows Joshua into the promised land. The difference being, this generation followed Joshua, who was a leader, saying, "Our God can." He tried to tell a generation before that. They followed him saying, "Our God can." The impossible battles that we look at and we say, boy, that's too big, that's too hard, I just can't. The impossible battles are possible because God is fighting for it. If we'll just trust him to fight for us. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you will Lord, help us to learn to rely on you. Right? I have